The message arrived on a quiet afternoon, the kind of afternoon that usually carried peace and the faint hum of comfort in every corner of the house. I was sitting near the window, folding warm laundry that still smelled faintly of soap and sunlight, the fabric soft under my fingers. Each fold was methodical, a small ritual that always gave me a sense of order in the midst of life's unpredictability. My phone vibrated softly beside me. I looked down and smiled without thinking. Mothers never outgrow that habit, the little surge of joy when their child reaches out. Even at my age, my heart still jumped when my son's name appeared on the screen, bringing with it memories of scraped knees, school mornings, and whispered secrets. But the smile didn't last. The message read, "Don't interfere with us. My wife feels uncomfortable. Please respect our space." No greeting, no softness, no mom. Just a clean, cold sentence that cut deeper than any argument ever could. I stared at the screen, rereading the words, hoping I had misread, that there was some hidden kindness between the lines. Maybe it was anger. Maybe his phone had been in her hands. Maybe he hadn't meant it. But the words stayed hard and immovable. My hands began to tremble. The folded towel rested on my lap, and I stared at the wall, the silence pressing against me. Memories rushed in unbidden. The nights I stayed awake when he had a fever. The carefully packed school lunches with little handwritten notes tucked inside. The years I worked extra hours so he could attend university without worry. I remembered the day he held my hand and whispered, "I'll always take care of you, Mama." And now I was being told I was interfering. It wasn't the boundary itself that hurt. I understood space was natural in families. What cut me deep was being made into a stranger overnight. I had only ever tried to help. Cooking meals when they were exhausted, paying bills quietly, offering advice when I thought it might help. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again, and deleted it once more. My fingers hovered over the screen, but my heart felt too heavy to fight. If love must beg for permission, I realized it is no longer love. It becomes humiliation. So, I did something I had never done before. I put the phone down and chose silence, not from indifference, but from love so deep I refused to shrink into argument. That evening I cooked dinner for one. The pot felt heavier than usual. The house felt wider, emptier. I ate slowly, listening to the ticking clock, wondering when my son had learned to speak to me as if I were a problem rather than a mother. Before sleeping, I opened my bank app. The quiet sacrifices, the help I'd given unnoticed, all seemed invisible now. Tears fell onto my pillow, soft and steady, carrying the heartbreak of realizing that love, when taken for granted, slowly turns into loneliness. That night, the door to my heart didn't slam shut. It closed gently, with dignity, sorrow, and the quiet stirrings of a strength I hadn't known I possessed. But the next morning brought an emptiness I hadn't expected, and a quiet decision that would change everything. The morning after his message, the house felt impossibly quiet. Each sound, water dripping in the sink, the soft hum of the refrigerator, echoed like a reminder of absence. I moved through my routine mechanically, washing dishes, sweeping the floor, making tea. Yet every motion felt heavier, every sound louder because it wasn't accompanied by laughter, voices, or even the subtle complaints of a family that feels safe together. Their absence was a presence in itself, a hollow echo of love that once filled the rooms. I didn't reach out. I didn't call. I didn't send another message. Part of me longed to explain, to remind him of the years I had poured into his life like water into soil, hoping he'd bloom with gratitude. But a sharper, quieter part of me had begun to awaken, the part that understood respect cannot be demanded, only earned. If they could speak to me like a stranger, then perhaps it was time I treated their absence with the same calm distance. The days that followed were heavy with silence. I kept busy to avoid dwelling too deeply, but even small tasks carried weight. Folding laundry felt like sorting memories. Each shirt, each sock, each tiny jacket a reminder of milestones I had celebrated quietly. First steps, school performances, late-night studying, the day he moved into his first apartment. I had been there for all these moments, yet now I was erased with a single sentence. I thought about reaching out again. Maybe my grandson needed me. Maybe he wanted a grandmother's hug. Maybe my son would reconsider. But every imagined scenario ended the same way. Rejection. The silence had already spoken more clearly than any words ever could. It said, "We don't need you. We don't want you. One afternoon I sat by the window with my tea watching neighbors pass by. I realized how much of my life I had spent bending, giving and sacrificing in hopes of keeping my family close. All that love, all those years of devotion, hadn't guaranteed a place at their table. Not because I had failed them, but because I had confused closeness with entitlement. My heart ached, but slowly a subtle shift began. Pain was still there, yes, but it carried a new clarity. I observed without interfering. I noticed my own breathing, my own heart, my own needs. I remembered that kindness is only valuable when it doesn't destroy your sense of self. And that evening, when my grandson's laughter drifted from the neighbor's house, I realized that a new kind of strength was beginning to take root within me. That evening, my grandson's laughter floated through the hallway, carried from the neighbor's house where he had been playing. A pang of longing struck me, an ache I couldn't ignore, but it was tempered by a quiet strength I was still learning to recognize. I had loved too much, for too long, to allow their indifference to shape my worth. In the following days I stopped sending money. The small bills, little gifts, the occasional gestures of help, all of it ceased. Not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of recognition. I had to reclaim my dignity, the part of me that had been quietly eroded by expectation and entitlement disguised as gratitude. Silence, I realized, hurt more than words ever could. Words could be argued against, explained, or forgiven. But silence revealed the truth. And the truth was unmistakable. I could no longer give what they had stopped valuing. In that realization, I discovered the first flicker of peace. It was a lonely peace, yes, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I began to feel the weight of my own life, not as a shadow beneath theirs, but as something solid, enduring, and quietly unshakable. I moved through my days differently. Folding laundry was no longer just a task. It was a meditation, a quiet acknowledgement of the life I had built and the love I had given. Each dish washed, each floor swept, was no longer about fulfilling an unspoken obligation. It was about honoring my own space, my own heart. It was mid-morning when a knock at the door startled me. A sharp, impatient sound that set my heart racing. I wasn't expecting anyone, and instinctively, I felt the familiar swell of hope. Perhaps they had come to apologize, to explain, to reconnect. But I had learned the hard way that hope, when misplaced, can be heavy. I opened the door cautiously. There they were. My son and his wife standing awkwardly on the porch. His smile was tight, rehearsed. Her eyes darted around the house, judging, measuring my worth. My grandson clutched his small backpack, oblivious to the tension that hung like smoke between us. "Mom," my son began, voice too casual, too practiced. "We just wanted to talk." I studied him carefully. There were no apologies in his tone, no acknowledgement of the message that had wounded me so deeply. Instead, a subtle urgency lingered, a hint of calculation. Their presence wasn't about reconciliation, it was about expectation. As I stepped aside to let them in, I realized that the next moment could define everything. Would I give in, or would I finally stand firm in my dignity? I stepped aside and let them in, keeping my voice calm. "Come in," I said, carefully placing the words without emotion, letting the weight of my silence speak for me. The house felt too quiet, each sound amplified. The soft shuffle of their feet, the faint creak of the door hinge, even the subtle rustle of my own movements. I poured tea, placing the cups on the table with deliberate care. My hands were steady, my expression neutral. Inside, my heart raced, but I refused to betray the strength I had been cultivating through observation and silence. After a pause, my son finally spoke. "We've been struggling a bit, bills, the apartment, maybe we could, a little help." His words felt familiar, yet this time they landed differently. They weren't asking, they were expecting. I nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly, letting the moment stretch. My tea cooled, untouched, a small reminder that I was no longer moving just to satisfy their needs. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his wife. "Mom, we wouldn't ask if it weren't important." I held his gaze steadily, the corners of my lips soft, carrying the weight of years of patience. "I understand," I said gently. "But things are different now. Love doesn't require proof in the form of money or favors. I've given for a long time, and I've realized that I need to protect my own peace. You'll have to manage this yourselves." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have been. They exchanged anxious glances, their practiced composure cracking slightly. Almost reluctantly, they gathered themselves to leave. My grandson lingered for a moment, looking up at me with wide, innocent eyes. I smiled softly, letting warmth reach him without compromise. "I'll see you soon, dear," I whispered. "But for now, it's time for you to grow on your own." They left without protest, footsteps fading down the street. As the door closed, a quiet relief settled over me. Not victory, not revenge, but a profound satisfaction. I hadn't shouted, begged, or allowed resentment to define me. In that moment, I understood that the most powerful lessons are learned in silence. They had come knocking after the money stopped, not because they had changed, but because they needed something I no longer owed. Bitter, sharp, but ultimately freeing. The realization marked the beginning of a new chapter. The house was empty again, yet it no longer felt lonely. It felt steady, felt mine. That night, as I sat by the window with my tea, I wondered what would it take for them to truly see me, not as a provider, but as the woman I had always been. The following days were strange but quietly liberating. No more urgent messages, no small emergencies demanding attention, no subtle requests hidden behind laughter or casual conversation. There was silence, yes, but it wasn't painful anymore, it was deliberate. A calm space I had carved for myself. A space where I could finally breathe without apology, without guilt. I began to tend to things I had neglected for years. Books I had always wanted to read. Letters I had meant to write. Hobbies long forgotten. Gardening became more than a chore. It was a ritual of growth I could control. Knitting reminded me of the patience I had spent teaching myself over the years. Long walks through the neighborhood, which I had once taken only to run errands for them, became moments of reflection and rediscovery. Each step felt lighter, each breath deeper. Slowly, I felt the weight of expectation lift, leaving space for self-respect, patience, and reflection. Occasionally, my thoughts drifted to them, my son, his wife, my grandson. A part of me ached for the connection I had lost. I wondered if they understood the depth of my love, or the quiet sacrifices I had made. But this ache no longer demanded action or explanation. It had become a mirror, reflecting back the lessons I had learned. That love must never come at the cost of your peace, that boundaries are not betrayal, and that emotional strength often blooms in silence. Months passed, and with them came clarity. I observed their lives from a distance, not with resentment but with calm attention. Their struggles, their small victories, their impatience. All of it revealed what I had already known. True respect and appreciation cannot be forced, they must come willingly. And if they never came, it would not diminish the years I had lived with integrity, kindness, and patience. One evening, my grandson appeared at the gate holding a small drawing he had made in school. "Look, Grandma," he said, beaming. I smiled, taking it gently in my hands. The warmth of the connection was immediate and pure, without expectation, without obligation. I hugged him softly and whispered, "It's beautiful, my love." In that simple moment, I understood a truth I had been learning all along. Choosing yourself is not selfish. Protecting your peace is the ultimate act of love, for yourself and for others. And as I looked into his eyes, I realized the next test was not whether I could love them again, but whether I could continue to love without losing myself. The days that followed were filled with a calm I hadn't known in decades. The house no longer felt like a stage for endless expectations. Instead, it felt steady, deliberate, fully mine. I spent mornings with tea by the window, sunlight spilling across the floor, listening to the quiet hum of life outside. Each sound, a bird, a passing car, the wind brushing leaves, reminded me that peace wasn't about absence but presence. Being fully present in my own life, not just as a mother or grandmother, but as a woman who deserved dignity and care. I continued my small rituals, letting them grow into routines that nourished both body and soul. Books once neglected were now finished, letters sent with sincerity, not obligation. Hobbies became meditative, walks became journeys of reflection. Slowly, the old weight of guilt lifted, replaced by an understanding that love does not demand submission, that kindness is only valuable when it does not diminish the giver. Occasionally, I thought of them, my son, his wife, my grandson, but now the thoughts were gentle, not sharp. I acknowledged the ache, then let it settle into quiet observation. I saw their small victories, their struggles, their impatience, and I realized the truth I had learned all along. Respect cannot be demanded. Gratitude cannot be enforced. Both must come freely, or they are meaningless. One afternoon, my grandson returned with another drawing. I took it, smiling as he shyly pressed it into my hands. No requests, no expectation, no demand for anything beyond my attention. That moment alone held more meaning than years of sacrifices unnoticed. A bond untainted by obligation, love expressed freely and fully. I realized that I had been living for them, but now I was living for me, and my love was no less because I had set boundaries. That night, as I closed the curtains and settled into bed, I felt whole. My heart was calm, my spirit quiet, my life finally fully mine. I had learned to give without losing myself, to love without surrendering dignity, and to stand firm without anger. Peace was no longer a fleeting visitor. It was a home I had built from the fragments of my patience, my resilience, and my care. And in that quiet strength I understood something profound. The most powerful love is the love that first honors yourself, for only then can it truly endure.